A different disavowal is expressed in exhibitionism. In this case, the exhibitionist knows very well that the other is not in the least pleased by his display, which the woman will experience for the most part as a form of aggression. Yet, nonetheless, the exhibitionist takes for granted that the woman who observes his penis enjoys this. He feels himself, in short, a generous provider of a pleasurable show. In visual perversions, the relation between self-enjoyment and the enjoyment of the other is split. On the one hand, the perverse individual knows that someone does not in fact enjoy himself as a voyeur or the other as a victim of this display. While on the other, he knows, between quotes, that this someone does fully enjoy the other as victim of the display or himself as the peeper. I don't know if it's simple, maybe it's a little bit complicated, but anyway. With pedophilia, what is disavowed is that common sense surrounding childhood and on which psychoanalysis has cast some doubt. That is, that children do not aspire to genital pleasure, that they are instead horrified by adult sexuality. But in fact, the pedophile at a certain point negates this knowledge, convincing himself, at times even rationally, that the child enjoys these genital sexual games as would an adult. As to transvestitism, the split between two kinds of knowledge regards the difference between 2 points of view, one's own and that of the other. The subject sees himself and knows himself as a man, while the other sees them and knows them as a woman. On the one hand, the transvestite knows he's not a woman. On the other, he enjoys the fact that the other considers him as a woman. On one hand, the pedophile knows that the other, the child, is not like an adult, while on the other, it is as though he perceives the child as an adult man or woman. No, but now I cannot, I'm sorry. There was another, no. Yeah. It's this, yes. It's a kind of a summary of what I, if somebody didn't understand, because I was too fast talking, it's what clear. It's the paradigm. I think it's the psychoanalytic paradigm of a perversion, in the sense that all are bound to Verleugnung, to some way of splitting of the ego, because we know from at a certain level, but we don't know, and we deny it at another level. What a relation is there then between Freud's originary approach, perversion as the effect of a Verleugnung, and the instead today's more exquisitely ethical approach, which is typical of a Lacan, but even in my book, for example, no? and other books, of course, in many important books of perversion in these latest years, which stress the ethical essence of a perversion, and in the sense they focus on the idea that perversion is the right word, not paraphilia, no? Which is neutral, no? Aethical. And before questioning ourselves about this relation, what is the psychoanalytic view on ethics or morality, whatever one chooses to call it? In particular, what specific relation does ethics have with the law, with the big L on one side and with the desire on the other? Now, in psychoanalytic doctrine, I think that maybe I lost the power. I think that we need some...
maybe the problem is here still?
Where's the cable?
Where's the cable?
The cable, the cable. The cable. It's on this?
That's not really, that's for, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe it is.
Do I continue?
But since it worked without a cable before, Sergio, it should be possible to make it work without a cable now.
Is all this? No? Sure. No.
Is that yours?
Yes, it's mine. Yes. Sorry.
That's the electricity.
But it's also essential.
You
But,
think it's the power?
but because the electricity was gone.
But that's the cable for electricity. So I'm.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but no. Images have certain important. I'm sorry. Okay. Resume the. Okay.
So,
I'm sorry.
it was out of power. Now I understand. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No. Okay.
Just, ja, precies. Loopt dat niet om.
Now, in psychoanalytic doctrine, the law which seems to oppose itself to desire is itself an expression of a desire. I think that is the fundamental of psychoanalysis. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that Freud's challenge was to explain everything in terms of the desire and the enjoyment of Lust, no? The Lust. This is because of the anthropologic metaphysics from which Freud took his moves makes the Lust the essential property of the human being, is fundamental truth. The Lust, as you know, signifies both pleasure, enjoyment, as well as the desire, urge, an ambiguous term, especially in Freud's conception, for which a desire is the contrary of a pleasure, it is pain and even anguish. I would thus translate the Lust as a desire enjoyment, respecting the ambiguity of the, you are German speakers, and maybe, I don't know if you can contest this idea that Lust is a very ambiguous term in German and also in Freud. Which means that both the desires and the law, which seems to contrast them, are Lust, forms of a desire enjoyment. But the law is whose desire. Freud elaborated an anthropological myth according to which the law and thus human civilization were the fruit of the totemic meal. After having murdered and eaten the father of the primal horde, the assassined brothers decided to divide the women equally among themselves. By means of this myth, Freud is evidently seeking to recount the origin of law. How does it happen that from the free dynamics of desire, a law emerges to seemingly limit the desire and enjoyment? It's the paradox. It's I think, the basic Freudian problem. A more subtle response was furnished by Jacques Lacan, who, recalling in part Hegel, proposed a complex theory of human desire, which we will only touch briefly here. As St. Paul ever knew, something prohibited by the law thus becomes very tempting. And here I quote letters to the Romans by St. Paul. However, I wouldn't have known sin except through the law. For I wouldn't have known coveting unless the law has said, you shall not covet. But sin, finding occasion through the commandment, produced in me all kinds of coveting. For apart from the law, sin is dead. From apart of the law, sin is dead. It's a very Lacanian statement. I was alive apart from the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. For sin, finding occasion through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. The commandment and the law, in a certain way, killed the subject because they create desire. This implication between law and the desire forms the background of a Lacanian theory. In effect, only in appearance do we desire something which then, in a second moment, the law will permit or prohibit. We deeply desire something, particularly in our erotic life, because from time to time it is either prescribed or alternately prohibited by this law. I wrote uppercase law, L, because we are not talking about the specific law of certain states of religions, but of a constitutive dimension of every human subject and its desire. Were it not for a law, we would not desire anything in a human, that is, in a complicated way. In Greek, law was originally called themis, which signified more or less imposition from the gods' ancestors. For Lacan, the imposed law expresses, however, in its turn, a desire, which is neither mine nor someone else's, but the other's. The other, written by a capital O, is not someone in particular, but a function thanks to which we can say, by contrast, that I am something or something is mine. The two spaces of subjectivity and otherness are interconnected, like the two sides of a glove. Many religions state that this other, who imposes the law, is God. Take the commandment prohibiting the desire of someone else's woman. For Lacan, we desire women, as men, of course, precisely thanks to this commandment, which permeates us even if we are non-believers. The last of the 10 commandments is the first for being problematic. How can a desire be prohibited? René Girard wrote some nice pages on this, that these paradoxical commandments which prohibits not an act, a behavior, but a desire. Acts, yes, can be prohibited, but the desires, now if a desire cannot be prohibited, it can nonetheless be prescribed precisely by prohibiting it. The point is that for the society to whom the 10 commandments were destined, one could desire only the woman of another. Because in societies which are either patriarchal or exist within an imaginary patriarchy, like contemporary Islam, for example, the woman is always someone's woman. Be his the father's, brothers, or lastly, husbands. In fact, in the Old Testament era, that commandment was in fact an impossible prescription, a paradox. If you want a woman, you have to desire the woman of others. It's a matter of fact. Human desire is generated by this unrealizable prescription. According to Lacan, there is an originary impasse of desire. But maybe we can track this basic impasse of desire yet in Freud. This I'm just finishing, I know.